Well, good morning and welcome to the Tuesday morning Bible study. This is the last Bible study of 2021. We will not be meeting next Tuesday. We're going to take a little break, which in a way is kind of too bad. I mean, everybody should have a break. Everybody should have a week off. I'll have a week off. That'll be nice. But it's kind of too bad in a way because after today, we really do only have one more session for this book of Genesis. We will, in our very first Bible study of 2022, we will complete the book of Genesis. So it's kind of a shame we couldn't complete it in 2021, but no, we're going to take a break next week. Today we are beginning chapter 47. We're going to look at two chapters today, chapters 47 and 48. And we are, this is, of course, we know that Joseph's family is here now, or they're here now, they're in Egypt now. All has been revealed. And today we're going to find Joseph's brothers and Joseph's father, Jacob, being presented to Pharaoh. There's one passage in here, especially in chapter 47, well, there is a passage in chapter 47 that, unless you've read the book of Genesis all the way through, or the Bible all the way through, it's a passage that almost never has made it into any sermon, any children's Bible, anything. It's a fairly unknown or unappreciated section, but it kind of sets up the book of Exodus in an almost dismaying way. Okay, so with that tantalizing hint, let's begin with verse 1 in chapter 47. So Joseph went and told Pharaoh, "My father and my brothers with their flocks and herds and all that they possess have come from the land of Canaan. They are now in the land of Goshen." From among his brothers, he took 5 men and presented them to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to his brothers, "What is your occupation?" And they said to Pharaoh, "Your servants are shepherds, as our ancestors were." They said to Pharaoh, we have come to reside as aliens in the land, for there is no pasture for your servants' flocks, because the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. Now we ask you, let your servants settle in the land of Goshen." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best part of the land. Let them live in the land of Goshen. And if you know that there are capable men among them, put them in charge of my livestock." Then Joseph brought in his father Jacob and presented him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many are the years of your life?" Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The years of my earthly sojourn are 130. Few and hard have been the years of my life." Few. They do not compare with the years of the life of my ancestors during their long sojourn. Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from the presence of Pharaoh. Joseph settled his father and his brothers and granted them a holding in the land of Egypt, in the best part of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had instructed. And Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with food, according to the number of their dependents. Okay, I'm going to pause there. What are some thoughts you have on these first 12 verses?
They were quick to tell him they were shepherds when they were told not to tell them that. Like children.
Well, yeah. I was just looking back up. Let's see.
He said to tell them that they were livestock herders.
Yeah.
Because shepherds were not thought well of in that country.
Yeah, let's see. Let's actually go back to that a little bit. It's back chapter 46, verse 31, where it said, Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh and will say to him, my brothers and my father's household who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. The men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock and have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. When Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? You shall say, your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth, even until now, both we and our ancestors, in order that you may settle in the land of Goshen, because all shepherds are abhorrent to the Egyptians. Right. So there you are. They
Does that mean they didn't like sheep?
you know what? I really don't have a good explanation for that. I wish I did. Now I will say there's a note in my own Bible where it says all shepherds are abhorrent. I have a note in my Bible that says that what the text probably means, the intention of it, is probably all foreign shepherds, not shepherds as such, but foreign shepherds. It says probably foreign shepherds, not shepherds as such, but being a threat to agriculture, shepherding was perhaps confined to the outskirts of settled areas. So yeah, so in other words, they're kind of separated from the mass of the Egyptians, but apparently it's a nice place to be too. It's a nice land, as land in the land of Egypt during a famine goes. It's a pretty nice place to be. Yeah. What else?
I'm puzzled by the little phrase that Jacob gave Pharaoh his blessing.
Mhm.
Why would Jacob, this foreigner from another era, why would he have the ability or to give the Pharaoh a blessing?
I think the blessing there is not the same kind of blessing that you would give to your son or to your family. I think it's kind of like me saying, God be with you.
Oh, okay.
Or God go with you, God bless you, something like that. I think that's probably what it means.
No, I thought it was much more important than that.
Oh yeah, it's not. It's not.
Do you think it was because of all the good that he had done for Joseph and he appreciated that?
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's part of it. I think part of it is that. I think part of it is probably good etiquette. I mean, it's respect. Like you're a guest in someone's house and you might say, bless this house. Something like that. It's just it is a gesture. It is a kind gesture. It's a gesture of respect. It's a recognition that you are not at your own home. Yeah. I think all of that is true. I think all of that's true. I could not just snicker a little bit when Jacob says, the years of my earthly sojourn are 130. Few and hard. I understand the hard part, but few have been my years.
Yeah.
That's all relative, of course, because he's comparing himself to his grandfather and to his father. Now I forget off the top of my head. I forget how long Isaac lived, but Abraham lived to. According to the text, according to the story, lived to be like 175. I believe that's right, which of course is not very much compared to to the further back people. But certainly the few and hard have been the years of my life. They do not compare with the years of the life of my ancestors during their long sojourn. Also like the use of the phrase sojourn. to refer to one's life, to see one's life as a sojourn or a journey.
Journey.
You know, I love that image. It's something I think of a lot. It's an image that I often think of life as. But yeah, you start somewhere and you head out, and you don't necessarily know where you're going, although you may think you know where you're going. You don't really. And there are tons of surprises along the way, and some you might, if you had known, you might have chosen, and others you might not have chosen. But to see life as a journey, I love the way Jacob refers to the span of human life as a sojourn. Yeah. What else? This is a little detail that's a little bit of a textual anachronism. Speaking of the verse 11, where it says, Joseph settled his father and his brothers and granted them a holding in the land of Egypt, in the best part of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had instructed. That's a little bit of an anachronism, because the Ramses, the land of Ramses, Ramses was, the reign of the historical Ramses was a long time after, if Jacob is an historical person. If Jacob is an historical person, the historical Ramses, the Pharaoh, would have been considerably after the time of the historical Jacob. So, but obviously this text is written, hundreds of years after that. So speaking of the land of Goshen as the land of Ramses in the lifetime of Jacob, again, is something of a historical anachronism, but that's okay. That is, by the way, what it means. It does. Land of Ramses is a synonym for Goshen in this case. All right. Now the next section here, verses 13 through 26. This is the section of text that I was talking about, being one that a lot of folks, unless you've read it all the way through, you don't necessarily know is there. And you never hear it preached on. No one ever talks about it. But it kind of sets up the conditions that make the enslavement of the Israelites possible, or makes it kind of explains what's going on. Looks like Bill is coming in. Hold on. Here we go. Let's see. There he is. Just waiting for his video to come in. Hello, Mr. Hernberg. Hello, Bill.
Good morning. Sorry,
Hey,
I'm
good morning.
late.
Oh, no problem. You're just in time. Just in time. We've started chapter 47, but we're up to verse 13. And I was about to read the section verses 13 through 26 in chapter 47. So far, what's happened is that Joseph has presented his 5 of his brothers and his father Jacob to Pharaoh. And so then the narrative carries forward from verse 13. And I was just pointing out that this section here, unless you've read the book of Genesis all the way through, this is a passage that you never hear sermons about. You never see it portrayed in a children's Bible or an illustrated Bible or of any kind. It's something that's kind of been dropped by the wayside. But in some ways, it sets up the book of Exodus in a kind of almost disappointing way. because Joseph, it turns out, is the architect of some of the conditions that ultimately turn against the Israelites.
Can we go back just a minute? I just have a
Yeah.
question.
Oh, yeah.
How do you, or what do you think the reasoning was, and how did he choose the 5 brothers? I'm just interested, why would he choose 5? Why didn't he take everybody? And how did he go about choosing those 5?
No idea. I mean, really, yeah, there's no explanation. There's no explanation offered in the text. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you just choose, if you have a choice of brothers, choose the ones who have the least chance of embarrassing you in front of the most powerful man in the world,
Some relatives you can't take to the boss.
Take your least embarrassing relatives in front of the most powerful man in the world. So
And it doesn't name them, so we don't know which 5.
right, it doesn't. And that in itself may be an interest. I mean, that may be a noteworthy fact, is that they don't name them. And so later on, there might be arguments among Israelites. Well, my ancestor was the one who got taken before Pharaoh. Oh yeah, well, it doesn't say my ancestor was. So anyway, okay, so here we are, verse 13. It says, now there was no food in all the land, for the famine was very severe. The land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. Joseph collected all the money to be found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan in exchange for the grain that they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. When the money from the land of Egypt and from the land of Canaan was spent, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us food. Why should we die before your eyes? For our money is gone. And Joseph answered, give me your livestock, and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock, if your money is gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the herds, and the donkeys. That year, he supplied them with food in exchange for all their livestock. When that year was ended, they came to him the following year and said to him, we cannot hide from my lord that our money is all spent and the herds of cattle are my lord's. There is nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our lands. Shall we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land in exchange for food. We with our land will become slaves to Pharaoh. Just give us seed so that we may live and not die, and that the land may not become desolate. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. All the Egyptians sold their fields because the famine was severe upon them, and the land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he made slaves of them from one end of Egypt to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had a fixed allowance from Pharaoh and lived on the allowance that Pharaoh gave them. Therefore, they did not sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people, now that I have this day bought you and your land for Pharaoh, here is seed for you, sow the land. And at the harvest you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be your own, as seed for the field, and as food for yourselves and your households, and as food for your little ones. They said, you have saved our lives. May it please my lord, we will be slaves to Pharaoh. So Joseph made it a statute concerning the land of Egypt, and it stands to this day that Pharaoh should have the 5th. The land of the priests alone did not become Pharaoh's. All right.
They're sharecroppers.
Took a 5th.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I wish our Pharaoh only took a 5th. That's pretty doggone generous compared to what we pay.
Yeah, it's wow. Yeah, this is a dismaying passage here. It's a dismaying passage. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, Joseph certainly took advantage of the people. I mean, it's a fairly tyrannical thing to do when you have that kind of power to exercise it over them. They're starving, they're begging, and he says, "Fine, this is what it's going to cost you."
Right.
Not I would think, not a godly thing to do. You can't blame that on God. He usually does say God is doing this, I'm not doing it. But
Right.
I don't think there's any way you can blame that on God.
No, no, no. Notice
Sorry, but it makes me think, it kind of goes back to what his brothers did to him. I mean, he sometimes is just not a nice guy.
yeah, you wonder. I mean, and part of this, I suppose you can just kind of file under the fact that none of these patriarchs are, just purely wonderful people. I mean, none of them are. All of them have serious character flaws. And while ultimately they're operating under the providence of God, and God has, bonded himself, covenanted himself to them, at the same time, there's no statement that these guys are saints. And Joseph is, now I wonder how much of this is, or is any of this related? Is this a kind of payback in Joseph's mind? Is this kind of a payback for being a slave in Egypt in the first place, for him being a slave in Egypt? Is this like him in a way kind of taking vengeance on the whole land?
Well, as usual, the people pay who'd had nothing to do with it.
Right.
The common people had nothing to do with his enslavement, but
right.
They're the one paying the price, which is not, which is fairly typical throughout history.
Yeah. Right.
Tell me you can, why the rich man dances while the poor man pays the band.
Yeah.
A wonderful country song. with a lot of philosophy there.
Right. Exactly. And notice the sequence, especially, actually it's through the whole passage. I was about to give you verses, but it's really through the whole passage. It starts with money. They hand that over. Then it goes to livestock. They hand over the livestock. And then it's handing over land and literally freedom. I mean, everything is handed over for the privilege of eating. And of course, Joseph is doing this. I mean, Joseph is doing this on behalf of Pharaoh. So, in other words, Joseph doesn't become the owner of all this stuff. Technically, Pharaoh becomes the owner of all this stuff. He's kind of, I was just thinking of like the hatchet men of King Henry VIII, if you remember your medieval English history, your Tudor history, and that Henry VIII had hatchet men who basically raided the monasteries and plundered the monasteries of all their wealth and everything, transferred them to the crown. There was an enormous transfer of wealth during the time of Henry VIII from the people and from the church to the crown, all in the name of Henry being the head of the church. And what you have here is a huge transfer of wealth to the crown, to Pharaoh himself.
Almost all companies and countries have hatchet men or hatchet people.
Uh-huh.
And there are those in our society now who are genuinely worried that we are trading too much freedom for security, and are fearful that that's an ongoing process. And that obviously is what the Egyptians did. They traded their lives literally for security. And I say, I read a lot about people who are concerned about our doing that. There's a trend toward that now.
It's a perennial struggle. I mean, it really is. It's a perennial struggle all through human history, where you essentially have this tension. You have this debate, and there's no final answer to it, because what you've got are two competing values, both of which are important. Freedom is important. Eating is important. Okay, but both are important. But sometimes, or living, continuing to live is important. And sometimes those can come into some measure of conflict. And COVID is a wonderful example of, COVID's a wonderful example of this, because if you balance it too much in favor of freedom, then a whole lot more people are going to die, because people are going to are going to use their freedom in dumb ways. Okay, so there's that. But then you flip it to the other side. If you're absolutely determined to do whatever it takes to make as few people dying as possible, there's a cost to freedom. There's a price to be paid for that.
There are two excellent examples of that on the opposite end of the spectrum: Nazi Germany and Chinese communism.
Yeah,
where people now, and some of them gave it up voluntarily, and some of them did not. But those are extreme examples of where security won out over freedom, and in China continues to do so. But once you've given it up entirely, it's no longer voluntary.
Right. Right. And it's not given back easily.
No, it has to be taken back with blood.
That's right. And so this is a perennial struggle in human history, trying to find the balance between the real need for security and the real need for freedom. And both are important, but finding the balance is not always an easy thing. The thing that's one of the things that what I meant when I said that this sets up the story of the Exodus is that what you have here is a complete transfer of power to Pharaoh, where Pharaoh now has all the wealth, he has all the power, he has the power and life and death over his subjects, which might not be so terrible if the Pharaoh is a wise and benevolent ruler, if he was a philosopher king, in Plato's sense. But what happens when the Pharaoh with absolute power and all the wealth is a bad guy?
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely. Exactly. And so the thing that starts off the book of Exodus, is in fact, turn to it, hold your place in Genesis. And it's just a few pages over. Turn to Exodus chapter 1. In the first 7 verses of chapter 1 in Exodus, talk about all the Israelites who are in the land of Goshen, presumably under the regime of a Pharaoh who has been benevolent, has been kind to Joseph, has been kind to Joseph's family. But then verse 8, now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And that right there, that's the whole problem, is Joseph has been the architect of a total transfer of power to Pharaoh. If you think of it, the office of Pharaoh has become all powerful, holding all the wealth. And it's been fine as long as this Pharaoh has been benevolent to the Israelites. But now there's a new Pharaoh who has all the wealth and all the authority that the other Pharaoh did, but he does not know Joseph. He sees the Israelites as ripe for the picking. And so he turns them into slaves, which then sets up the whole need for a Moses and so forth. I mean, like in terms of our country, certainly, in the development of the Constitution, and Bill, I know you know this exceptionally well, that the whole point of the Constitution and of the Federalist Papers and all the thought that went into the process of developing our branches of government and all that is precisely so that no one person or one part of government has all the power without checks and balances.
Except we've been remarkably unsuccessful in stopping the concentration of power in the federal government. Perhaps maybe not so much in one branch, but in the federal government as opposed to state and local governments. It's been a constant transfer almost since the beginning of the Constitution, sadly, right. I think. But no,
and that's a fair critique. At the same time, it kind of goes to the whole security and freedom business.
Exactly.
Is that what happens when state and local governments want to do terrible things, or turn a blind eye to terrible things?
What happens when you have an incredible disaster in your state and you go running to the federal government for security?
Right.
Constant.
What you have,
they got all the money.
Yeah, right. What you have here in the end is that you inevitably in life and in society, you're going to have situations where it would be convenient for certain people to have the power to do good, to be in a position to do good, but the power itself can be problematic in the wrong hands. And so it's, again, the history of human society is trying to find the balance, the proper balance between power and between power and freedom, and how much power to invest in an authority. And it's just, there's no final resolution to that.
You just put your finger on the cause of every revolution throughout history, right there.
Yeah. So there you are, and it's and so the thing that's disturbing in this passage is that there's a very real way in which Joseph himself unwittingly becomes the architect of the oppression that is going to be visited upon his people later. he's basically transferred to Pharaoh all this power and all this wealth. And again, it's not so, it may not seem all that bad as long as the Pharaoh's friendly to Joseph and friendly to Joseph's family, but it's going to become bad, and it's going to become clear how bad it is when a successor doesn't know Joseph, doesn't feel any particular need to look out for Joseph's family, and starts using the power that was originally handed over to Pharaoh by Joseph himself, then gets turned on Joseph's own people. And, things go badly. Things go badly after that. Yeah. So this is why I say it's a dismaying passage, because, we kind of knew that there was an element of schmuck in Joseph all along. But the thought that he was actually an unwitting architect of the very slavery that would be visited on his people later is a dismaying thought. All right, let's turn to somewhat happier stuff here. In verse 27, the heading in my Bible for the part that closes out this chapter is the last days of Jacob. Now, Jacob doesn't die in this chapter. He's going to still be alive for a little bit. Verse 27, thus Israel settled in the land of Egypt, in the region of Goshen, and they gained possessions in it, and were fruitful and multiplied exceedingly. Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147 years. When the time of Israel's death drew near, he called his son Joseph and said to him, if I have found favor with you, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal loyally and truly, and to deal loyally and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt. When I lie down with my ancestors, carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. He answered, I will do as you have said. And he said, swear to me. And he swore to him. Then Israel bowed himself on the head of his bed. Not dead yet. All right. You remember that, look in verse 29, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal loyally. You remember that?
Yeah.
It's been a while. So if you don't remember it, that's perfectly okay. It's been quite a while, but it was way back. It was way back in chapter 24, where a similar request was made. That when you make an oath, I want you to put your hand under my thigh. And we said then, and it's true now, that the meaning of this was that there's just no nice way of putting this, no PG rated way, G or PG way of saying this. When your hand is that close to somebody's, there's a certain degree of power that you have, and you're very close to the source of procreation and generation. And so it is a way of expressing how serious this is.
Seals the oath.
Seals the oath. It really does. This was a thing. This was a way of making an oath in this time and place. It's interesting what the oath is about. I don't want to be buried in Egypt. I want to be taken. I want you to take my body back and to bury me in that cave. Remember that cave that Abraham bought from the Hittites. And he insisted on buying it rather than being given it, because he didn't want there to be any question about who owned it. And so Jacob made Joseph swear that he would be taken back, his body would be taken back and buried alongside Abraham, Isaac, Sarah, and Rebecca. And so, but Jacob still got a little life in him yet. There's still more for him to do, as you will see. Let's go ahead and read at least the first part of chapter 48. In fact, I'd like to read all of chapter 48, and then we can talk about, there are a few things to point out in chapter 48 to talk about. All right, chapter 48. After this, Joseph was told, "Your father is ill." So he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to you," he summoned his strength and sat up in bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me and said to me, 'I am going to make you fruitful and increase your numbers. I will make of you a company of peoples, and I will give this land to your offspring after you for a perpetual holding. Therefore, your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt are now mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are. As for the offspring born to you after them, they shall be yours. They shall be recorded under the names of their brothers with regard to their inheritance. For when I came from Padan, Rachel, alas, died in the land of Canaan on the way, while there was still some distance to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, 'Who are these?' Joseph said to his father, 'They are my sons, whom God has given me here.' And he said, 'Bring them to me, please, that I may bless them.' Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, and he could not see well. So Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. Israel said to Joseph, 'I did not expect to see your face, and here God has let me see your children also.' Then Joseph removed them from his father's knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand towards Israel's left, and Manasseh in his left hand towards Israel's right, and brought them near him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, 'The God before whom my ancestors Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all harm, bless the boys. And in them let my name be perpetuated, and the name of my ancestors Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude on the earth.' When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. So he took his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to his father, 'Not so, my father. Since this one is the firstborn, put your right hand on his head.' But his father refused and said, 'I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations.' So he blessed them that day, saying, 'By you Israel will invoke blessings, saying, God make you like Ephraim and like Manasseh.' So he put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, 'I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your ancestors. I now give to you one portion more than to your brothers, the portion that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow.'" Okay. What do you think?
That has now become a family tradition, hasn't it?
It has.
The younger son.
Yeah,
There
Joseph,
is no advantage to being the firstborn.
Joseph did it, his father did it to Joseph. Joseph did it to his brother. and now his father's doing it to his grandchildren. So
That's right. That's right. That's right. I mean, I'm the firstborn. Forget about me. I don't count. Yeah, it is a family tradition. It seems like. I mean, just each generation, each time. Isaac was younger than Ishmael, and Esau was older than Jacob, and now and Joseph, and see, and that's a little bit of the irony, is that Joseph was a younger brother. Joseph himself was a younger brother. He of all people ought to be able to appreciate this.
And Tom, as you know, that's an incredibly strong tradition that survived with primogeniture up through the Middle Ages and probably even longer.
Uh-huh.
So to violate that, I presume, was a fairly big step.
Yeah.
Then, because it certainly was later.
Yeah.
Step.
Yeah. Yeah.
Say it become a family tradition with them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely. It in a way, it is. In a way, it sets the tone for the whole Bible. In Jesus, it gets expressed in the form of the first shall be last and the last shall be first. In the Hebrew scriptures, the idea is always that the one that God chooses is different than the one that human beings choose. And you look no further than King David. David, before he became king, before he was anointed, he was the youngest. He was the youngest of a whole slew of brothers who were taller, more kingly. I mean, there are a whole. But the text explicitly says that human beings look on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. And God chose David, even though he was the youngest. He was the least likely candidate of Jesse, of all of Jesse's sons. David is the one that God chooses. And as you say, it's a recurring theme. It starts with these patriarchs, and it just keeps going. That God chooses differently. God chooses differently than human beings choose. That God has a special place in his heart for the underdog. And again, that carries over into the New Testament and with the gospel of Jesus and so forth, that God has a special place in his heart for the underdog. Doesn't mean he loves the underdog more than the overdog, but there is a certain kind of favoredness, a certain kind of attention that God gives to the underdog.
I have a question. He didn't choose here. It's Israel who chose. It wasn't
Oh,
God.
I know that. I'm just saying that this is typical though of the entire, it's typical of the entire Old Testament tradition. In this way, Jacob is in this way, he's acting like God does. He's consistent with sort of the values of God or the quirky ways of God, different than, because earlier it is God who's choosing. It's God who's saying, no, your heir isn't going to be Ishmael. I'm going to bless Ishmael. Ishmael's great, and don't worry about him. He's going to be okay. But Isaac's the one I'm going to carry this promise through. And then with Isaac, it was, don't worry about Esau. Esau's going to be fine. But he's not going to get the blessing. That Jacob is the one. And so down the line, it's either God or it's one of the representatives of God who's consistently making a choice like this. That's really, really. Now, I should say too, and this has really nothing to do with anything, but I know certainly in medieval times, in medieval Europe anyway, it was often the second son who would become a priest. The older son, usually the oldest son would be the one who would get all the titles and the lands and all that, and then the second son would be dedicated to the church.
And where do you think that practice originated? If it's not biblical, I always assumed it was biblical, but you've destroyed that. So how do you think that practice primogeniture arose? If not from, maybe it was a misunderstanding of the scriptures. You got any ideas?
Well, I don't think it had anything to do with the scriptures at all. I think it was. I think that tradition is. I think it's the way human beings have almost always done things, and in this respect, the Jewish tradition, this biblical Jewish tradition, is like the big exception. It's the big standout to the way literally every other culture does it. And in that way, medieval Europeans and all that were typical of the rest of the world. They weren't actually typical of this biblical tradition. In this way, the biblical tradition stands in a kind of prophetic tension with literally every expression of human society throughout history, including Christian European civilization too. Yeah.
The town of Rugby, Tennessee was founded by second sons of England who came, and they celebrate that. They still have a festival yearly to celebrate their founding.
Yeah, kind of along those lines. And I say this as one who very much enjoys genealogy, that it was often the younger sons, if a family of some measure of prominence had land holdings and whatnot, if anyone was going to make the trip to America, make the trip, venture out, make the trip to America in the 17th or 18th century, it was one of the younger sons. And the reason that is because of primogeniture, the younger sons didn't stand to inherit very much.
They were left with nothing.
And so it was in their interest to leave home and strike out on their own and seek their own fortunes. And it was those sons who came to America. And so you could say that part of the American spirit was kind of wired into, that piece of the American soul of individualism and initiative and sort of the entrepreneurial spirit. This is kind of wired into the soul of America from the beginning. The very people who were coming over, the first English colonists, were often those younger sons who knew that if they were going to make anything of their lives, it wasn't going to be handed to them. It was going to be because they worked for it, not because they inherited it from their English lord father or something. Just an interesting little historical tidbit there too.
Also, the people that settled the colony of Georgia were really in debt, and so they were not the favorite people at all.
That's right. That's right. In fact, I was going to say there was I wouldn't say Georgia was exactly like Australia, but it wasn't that far off either. Everyone knows that Australia was a penal colony. Practically every one of European ancestry who lives in Australia is a descendant of convicts. at some point or another, and it doesn't mean they were bad people. There are such things as convicts who were convicted unjustly. I mean, there are such things as that. And then in other cases, the crimes were things that we would look at today and go, is it really a crime to be poor? Is it really a crime to be in a lot of debt? I mean, we'd say maybe not really. But yeah, that was very true of Australia, and it was to some extent true in Georgia too. Yeah, good stuff. Anything else on this unusual blessing of Jacob? The way, I mean, he's doing this. The one he wants to bless in the first sense is the younger son, the younger Ephraim, but he's over here, so he does this, and it explicitly says that Joseph grabs his father's hand and tries to move it. This is the blessing hand right here. Joseph actually takes it and tries to move his father's hand to bless the other one. And it's just all the more ironic, given the family history, given Joseph himself. But I love Jacob's response. Verse 19. I know, my son. I know. Oh gosh, it's such simple words, and yet there's so much that lies behind it. So much history, so much experience. I know, my son. I know.
Given that, Tom, and the irony of Joseph setting the stage for the slavery of the Jewish people, I look forward to your sermon on the God of irony.
The God of irony?
Yes.
That's a great point. I need to preach on that. I need to preach on things like that. I will say this has nothing to do with Genesis. But I will say that in the coming year, I have a sermon series on the parables of Jesus that I'll be preaching in January and February. It's 5 Sundays where I'm selecting parables to preach on, and then in March, as a Lenten sermon series, I'm preaching on 4 Sundays, 4 great hymns of the church, and using both the words associated with the hymn, but also the history behind it, and even something about the music. This is very much, as all our services are, this is very much, though, a collaboration between me and Kevin Kelly, our music director, who's a true musical scholar, in addition to being tremendously talented in the way of performance. But yeah, he and I are collaborating on that, and it'll be something to. Yeah.
Our Sunday school class last Sunday was the history of hymns, certain hymns, and what book of the Bible and what verse did they come from. And it was very interesting. Yeah. That's a good bit of what we're going to do with this hymn series. Now Google it. There's a lot of information on Google.
Oh yeah. No, it's good. I forget the exact ones we're doing. We're closing with the last one will be the most Lenten-y of all of them, and that's the Passion Corral from Johann Sebastian Bach. "O Sacred Head Now Wounded."
Well, these were Christmas hymns, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that'll be good.
Great Sunday school lesson.
All right. Yeah. I know it really is. If y'all are ever in Atlanta, and you want a good church experience and good Sunday school experience, go to Shallowford Presbyterian Church in Atlanta. I was at Shallowford for a few years, and that's how I know Phyllis. And but go to Shallowford, but go to Sunday school first. And Phyllis, what Sunday school class are you part of there?
I'm now back in pairs and spares.
Pairs
Joe
and-
and I were there, and then it got difficult for him to make that trip upstairs. And we started going to Sojourners, which was a group of folks our age.
right.
And then after he died, I went back. Well, Sojourners just got dissolved during COVID.
Right.
We all died except me. So anyway,
Yeah.
I'm back in pairs and spares.
Okay. Okay. Well, good. All right. Well, I tell you, let's go ahead and wrap up. We're actually about on time for what we normally do anyway. So, but let me just say, next week we'll be off. We will. I urge you all to relax and have a good time between Christmas and New Year's, and certainly hope that all of you have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year celebration. Let's close in prayer, and let's do that. Oh God, we give you thanks for this day and for this opportunity to gather as we do each week. Thank you for these stories that we have the privilege of reading now and discussing. We find, as we so often do, we find that they, though written about an age that many centuries ago, and yet find that they're very timely and very relevant to us. Speaking of conditions and truths of human beings in seemingly all times and places. Lord, we pray for all who are sick, for all who are suffering, all who are struggling with difficult diagnoses, for those who are who wonder how they're going to go forward. We pray for your strength and your healing. Pray for your peace. We pray that we grow into being the disciples that you will us to be as we walk with each other. We pray all of these things now in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay.
Phyllis,
Thank
I'd
you,
love to
and
know
Merry
which hymns,
Christmas, everyone.
but Phyllis,
Merry
I'd love to know which
Christmas.
hymns and how many you worked on in that Sunday school class. Can you email that to me if I give you my
Yeah.
email address?
Did I do, I'm sorry. What was the beginning of the question?
I said, I would like to know how many hymns and which hymns you guys
Um,
chose to do that on, and you could email it to me.
Yes, I will look and see if I still have that information.
Okay.
It really was most
I'll
interesting.
bet. My email address, do you have a pencil, pen?
Yes,
It's lawdog, LAWDAWG,
start over again.
lawdog,
Law Dog,
Yeah.
LAW,
DAWG,
Because of
DAW.
course it is.
Because you're from Georgia, okay.
Yeah, 73 at bellsouth.net.
Okay, Law Dog, what now? Start that
73
73 at
at bellsouth.net.
at Bell South.
Yeah. You'll note that in the emails that I send you each week, with the Zoom link, I don't attempt to hide each of your emails. I don't attempt to hide them from the rest of you.
Oh, okay.
So if you go to the email, you'll see all the
Okay.
addresses. But yeah, his is in there definitely. Law Dog.
Okay. Okay, good enough. All your interests are right there, huh?
That's right. That's right. Okay.
Oh,
All
All
right.
right.
Well, y'all have a
Have a wonderful Christmas.
yes. All of you have a very blessed and Merry Christmas.
Merry
Yeah.
Christmas.
Well,
Merry Christmas,
Thank you.
everybody. See you
All right.
next year.
Merry Christmas
Bye-bye.
to you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.